there, hope you're doing well. In this podcast, let's talk about how important it is to breaking a problem down. Now, it might sound cliched and or simple enough, but unfortunately, the things that are simple on paper are never simple in execution, or at least not consistently so. So I think it's worth a podcast for sure. So what do I mean by breaking a problem down into manageable, smaller, simpler, understandable pieces? Let's say, and again, if you've done this for a while, you might react to these comments and this feedback, these opinions slightly differently than if you're just starting out your career, right? But let me rewind like 100 years and go back to when I started my career. So let's say on day one or week one or month one of your job, no matter what you've studied in college, no matter how many internships you've done, when you actually start doing the work, I use that word loosely. Some internships may be good, some may be all right, and others might be simply boring and brain dead and not particularly useful. At least that's my experience. Now, each one of us is blessed to experiencing those wonderful internships, right? They're not that many out there, unfortunately. So you're still new. No matter what you've done, you're still new when you go to work because you're now solving real business problems, working with real people who've been doing this for a while and trying to help them, knowing a whole lot lesser than what they actually do at that point of time. And now if you end up in a team or a company that is willing to teach you and be patient with you, then you're blessed. In that sense, I was blessed, right? I couldn't be more thankful to my team at Diebold, the company Diebold in Ohio, and my team. Every one of them was a whole lot more experienced than I was. My experience was like literally 0 years, but they were very patient. It was a beautifully patient team that was willing to sort of teach me, help me understand what it meant to build, practically, right? Not theory that you've learned all through college years, but practically tell you how you could execute on some of these things that you may have learned. Maybe some well enough, maybe not, maybe others not so well, right? But if that's your first company, then you're blessed. But again, it may not end up being your first company, right? But even if it is, I think you still have to make your effort. So you have to understand when someone tells you, let's say I'm starting my first day in this real world, and someone says, and this example is not just for fresh graduates, it's for everybody, each one of us, even someone like I who's been doing this for 20 years. But every project I start working on, every product in our platform at Snowpal that I start working on, I'm a newbie, right? Someone who's never done that before in that capacity, in that team, with that group of people, solving that type of problem. So you're still a fresher. You're always a fresher. You're always a beginner. That's personally how I feel. So you start, and someone tells you, okay, I need. Let's start with the very basic, right? Someone tells you I need to go implement a sign up functionality on a web application. So they're not asking you to implement the API. They're not asking you to worry about deployments. They're not asking you to worry about mobile apps, native mobile, whatnot. They're telling you, hey, I want you to do a very simple thing. Go implement sign up and do it on a web application, right? Let's say we are starting a greenfield product. Now, if you're someone new, or even if someone who's done this for many years, but this is a slightly different kind of problem, imagine that signing up is a unique problem, which it is not, so it's a terrible example, but you get the idea. Right? You can substitute that with machine learning or augmented reality or any one of those really useful, nice, fancy new things out there. But hopefully, take an example that resonates well with you. The example is not as important as what I'm going to talk about further beyond the example or taking that example. So they tell you to implement a sign-up page. You could get overwhelmed, right? Because you don't know the existing application. Maybe there is some code, maybe there isn't any code. Maybe you have to write the first line of code, but let's not make it even more difficult than it needs to be. Let's say there is already some existing code. Now you're going to have to just add some functionality, and maybe they have other forms of sign up, or they're just asking you to support Google, sign up using Google, for instance, right? Which is one of the next things that we will actually be doing at Snowpal, because right now we support Facebook, Apple, and email-based signups. Google is the next item in our list of social media signups, right? And that list is only going to keep growing. So I tell you as a new engineer, hey, can you go implement sign up? You could, it's natural if you felt overwhelmed because you may have never implemented anything in the real world. You may have just done it in college, at home, projects like or fun projects or hobbies or whatever, but not something that solves real business problems on applications that are actually in production. How do you break the problem down? If you looked at it as, oh my God, how do I implement sign up? You could be overwhelmed. And again, this example, maybe a trivial one. Don't let the any learning that comes out of this podcast be limited because of the triviality, assuming there's such a word, of that example. So let's say you're like, okay, I don't know how to implement sign up. I'm going to be worried. What do I do? Break this problem down. And how can you break it down? You can do it 1,000 ways. Here's one approach that comes to my mind as I'm recording this video. I'm like, okay, I need to sign up. Is this application, does it have code already or is it brand new? We said that it already has code. So I'm going to not even worry about what to implement. My first concern is, let me get it up and running. Let me ask for the repository to your admin and say, hey, can you grant me access? And if they want to grant you access, they might ask for your SSH keys. So you generate the SSH key on your machine, give them the public .pub version of that key. They add it to GitHub, and now you have access to the repository. You clone the repo. So do a git clone the repo, check out the branch, ask your team lead, hey, which branch should I be working off of? They might tell you develop. Go check out develop, create a new feature branch off of develop, and try to get the app running. Look at the README. If it's 10 pages long, then it's not your problem, it's your team lead's problem. It should take you no more than 10 minutes to get your any app up and running. If that's not the case, either it's not been set up correctly or it's just, I don't want to say poorly documented, because if you need too much documentation and it's poorly done to begin with. Anyways, let's say you give yourself some time, saying in the next half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, half a day, I want to make sure I get my pieces working. Now the thing is, it might have a number of other dependencies, right? It might depend on third-party apps, your internal services, your internal apps that are separately deployed from your current application. So you ask your team lead, hey, what are the things that I need to get running before I can get this particular app up and running? They might say you need like 6 other things, but don't worry about them because you're not touching those applications. So they would tell you that there is a way that they may have stopped these dependencies out already, meaning you fake the existence of those services because you're not limited by those services being up and running. Or if they're already running in your lower environments like dev or test or whatnot, or integration, you can point to those environments and start getting your app up and running. But the first order of business is get your application up and running. Don't even worry about the sign up. Now that you got your app up and running with your dependencies, maybe you're connecting to the remote database, maybe you have to run a database locally, whether it's Mongo or MySQL or Postgres or Oracle, whatever it is, right? You run it locally or connect to something on the server. You just spend those initial hours trying to get that app up and running. And then once you do that, check it out. Oh, it does support sign up through email, but it does not support sign up through Facebook. That's my charter. Or I don't know if I said Google or Facebook. I think I said Google. I need to support sign up through Google. Are there other examples? If they already have a social media example like Facebook and it's OAuth and whatnot, there are going to be lots of similarities. So you want to look at those similarities and understand those design patterns before you again write any line of code. Understand the problem. Now you document it the way you want to document it quickly in notes or in TextPad or however you want to document this, right? Just do it the way it works most efficiently for you, not so much to make it formal, right? Now you jot down notes, you have a cheat sheet, whatever, and you start running the app. Now that it's running, you play with it just to get the feel of it. And now you ask yourself, okay, now my job is to implement sign up using Google. If that is Facebook or GitHub or some other social media sign in, I can use that, sort of look at that as a design pattern or example, makes my life even easier. But if there is no such thing and the only sign up is through emails and passwords, then you have to think slightly differently, right? Because you don't have a more concrete example. Regardless, you understand the pieces in the platform, in the code base that deal with security. You don't care about the rest of the features. You only care for your feature that is signing up, and you're signing up meaning the user has not logged into your application, because once they log in, if they logged in, it means they would have already signed up, right? So you're only concerned with the public pages, not the secure pages. So now not only are you not worried about all the other services in your platform, You're only worried about you're also not worried about the secure, you're not worried about the secure pages or the functional pages. You can ignore 90% of what your product is doing, 95%, and just focus on the public pages and get a feel for how they've been implemented. Maybe there is a public home page. Maybe there's another sign up page. There is one in this example. So I'm going to take that and create another and start working on my feature. Now your sign up is likely not going to be a new page. So you're going to be like, okay, where do I put this button? Is it a button? Where does it go? Does it go on this page or that page, or how many pages? That's you make a note of that. And at that point, now you have a good idea because your app is up and running, you have your dependencies in place, you have your requirements clarified, whatever tool it is that you're using to track your requirements. You hopefully are using Snowpal to managing your projects better and simpler, and not one of those really complex tools with like 200 levels of configuration. And I'm sure you know what I mean when I'm talking about 200 levels of configuration. Anyway, so you go look up the requirement. You're like, okay, the requirement would actually have some description. It's going to have an acceptance criteria. If it does not have, you're going to have to ask your product manager or your team lead, hey, where is the acceptance criteria? What should be the outcome of my implementation? And the acceptance criteria would look something like, Chris should be able to sign up, see a button. I'm just, it could be slightly different, but hopefully you get the idea. The user should be able to hit that button, and if they have already been signed into Google, it should directly take them into the product, to the landing page. But if they have not signed into Google, it's going to have to redirect to a Google page, Google sign-in page. You enter the credentials. If it's correct, Google's going to redirect you, and then you're going to actually seamlessly redirect the user to the landing page. That might be the acceptance criteria. Now there's many pieces to that puzzle as well. You want to break it down. Don't worry about every single thing because you're going to get overwhelmed. First things first at that point. What do I need to do? I need a button. What button? It's a Google sign-in button, right? So do I create it from scratch? Not really. You go look for a plugin out there, whether it's Flutter, whether it's React, whether it's whatever else, Angular, whatever it is that you're using. It's likely that there is going to be a button, that an embedded code. If it's a web, we mentioned a web application, right? So you're going to have to find that embedded piece of HTML and any associated JavaScript that goes with that to implementing that piece of functionality. So one of the first things you will do is figure out where you need to go look for help. Go search for it. You're going to find some examples. Don't use the very first example because that may not be the best one. It's like selling your home, right? The first buyer who's showing interest may not be the best buyer because you might actually, the next one might pay you more, or at least what you've listed your home for, not lower. So don't always look for the very first example. Look for the first good one, and that counts by experience, right? You can take the first one and have it working or get the feel of it, but then you ask further questions and expect guidance from other team members, senior members, to tell you why that approach makes sense or why it does not make sense, right? So anyways, you look for an example and never reinvent the wheel. You have to solve unique business problems for your company. If you end up, your job here is not solve how integration with Google sign-in works. It's been done a million times, right? There's plenty of examples out there across platforms and languages and stacks and frameworks. You just use it and customize it and to suit your needs. So do not reinvent the wheel. I see that junior engineers, freshers out of college, mid-level engineers, senior engineers, and really senior engineers, all of us make the same type of mistakes sometimes, unfortunately. So do not reinvent the wheel. Focus on the problem that nobody else is going to be able to solve for you. Don't solve the problems that have been solved already by other people. Now you find the button, and then you say, you essentially find that embedded HTML, the JavaScript, and then start slapping it on your page, and then you'll start seeing it. Now it may not look picture perfect initially. Don't get bogged down. Get the button before you make the button look pretty and spend one day getting it to be the right shape, form, size, color, and whatnot, because if you spend a day or 2 days or whatever trying to beautify it, and then you tell your team the update is, I'm trying to beautify the button, people will be like, oh my God, so is it working or is it not working, right? So how you slice and dice the problem down is very, very important. Probably the most important, one of the most important things. Try to get it working, and then you can adjust what you need to adjust. To me, a button that does not look perfect, not even close to perfect, that's functional, has a click event, and on click it redirects me to maybe eventually takes me to my landing page, or if there's no Google sign-in that has happened in my session, redirects me to Google, is a whole lot more progress than the button looking picture perfect, right? So that's what I mean by breaking the problem down, making it smaller and taking meaningful steps towards your outcome. Try to get the action working. And now you go to the next level. Now I have an event handler there. I react to it in the code, and I'm going to do whatever it is I need done. Now you might have to look for existing examples and design patterns in the code base, so your code smells, feels, and looks similar to other pieces of other pieces of code in the repository, so it doesn't look very unique to your style. You can use your style. Each one of our styles is important, and we have to respect it, but you don't want to have that look dramatically different from the rest of the code base, because it's going to make life difficult from a maintenance standpoint, right? So there are conventions, linters, and whatnot, but again, that's for another video. So you look at the code, and now you're going to get worried about, where do I need to place this code? Should go in this file, this directory, that directory, whatever, right? Again, don't get bogged down. Create a new file, put it all in one place for now. Get it working. Once you get it working, then you can worry about refactoring and moving it to different places, because that's, I think, again, there's no single way to skin the cat here, but to me that's meaningful progress, because as somebody who, if you're going to report your update to me, that's what I'm interested in seeing. Hey, are you making progress? Are you going in the right direction? And then if you have line items or to-dos to make adjustments to each of these items during the course of your in the feature branch, that's perfectly understandable, acceptable, and actually is the right way to go. You want to get things working, and then you want to modify, tweak them, refactor them, clean them, make them better. So you essentially want to put it in one file, do the integration, and get your code to the point where it'll either redirect to Google, or once it does, whatever the callbacks and registration that need to happen happens. So Google will then send you a code or a token back, and then you can essentially redirect the user to the landing page. Now you may not know everything that's involved here when you get started, but then figure out, okay, if the user is not signed into Google, what should logically happen, right? And maybe it would be part of the acceptance criteria, so you don't have to rethink this or reinvent the wheel even there, because your product manager would have hopefully done this job for you. So you say, okay, I need to redirect to Google, and if I've already been signed in, I need to not have that intermediary step, and then it should be entirely seamless, so the request comes back and the user lands on the landing page, ends up on the landing page. Now, as part of this, you might have to do some API integration, right? The API team would have published some endpoints. They'll say, hey, if the request is legit, blah, 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 yada, 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 you need to make this endpoint so we can create a user in our system for this Google user, essentially, right? And if there is already a user that does exist with that same email, because they registered through the email and password, what should happen, right? It cannot be two parallel users. You have to merge those users. But fortunately, that's not your problem. That's the API team's problem, and it's transparent to you, so it probably wouldn't even be part of the acceptance criteria. I just mentioned it because it came to my mind, but completely ignore that, because you don't even have to worry about it. You shouldn't have to worry about it as somebody implementing this on the web interface. So you have to integrate with the API, some endpoints. Then the question is whether it's graph. Hopefully it's not SOAP. Hopefully it's not even REST. Maybe it's graph, but maybe it's REST, because it's very popular even today. And it's going to remain popular for a while, actually, even as graph gets more popular. Anyway, so that is an integration there. But again, don't get bogged down by the integration. Just have a message that says this needs to integrate with the endpoint. I will deal with it at a later time. That's how you break the problem down. You take that item, whether it's a story or an epic or whatever the terminology is, you take that story, break it down into really, really small pieces, so you can it is actually useful in many ways, more than one way. One is it tell you how you're progressing, what your dependencies are, whether you're blocked, whether you're not blocked, etc. And two, it'll actually give enough updates to your management, your project manager, your delivery manager, your development manager, whoever that person is that you're reporting to. I prefer to have answers that are self-explanatory, so I don't have to answer questions that I don't have to answer if I don't have to, right? Because if you provide all of the details and a lot more, then the person who needs those updates will not look for those, ask you those questions. And similarly, when I played, again at Snowpal, I do play 7 different roles, but when I consult for clients, I play a few roles that are similar, sometimes very different from the roles I perform at Snowpal. So you understand what your role is, and then if I put myself in my shoes at Snowpal, where people actually tell me that they are done, I'd rather not have them ask them the question, and rely on, if we use GitHub for all of our issue tracking, right? I want to see updates there, so I don't need to ask people questions. It's not there. It's not the best. It's not time spent the best way either for me or for my team members if I ask them questions for which they could have provided or they have provided answers to offline and on these tools. So when you interact with folks, you want to keep that interaction to be items that you have to interact about, and it's something that's very exciting and very passionate to discuss and chat about, and not items that are very brain dead and mundane like status updates, right? That to me can and should be done offline. Anyways, I know I covered a bunch of items, and hopefully the video didn't bail on me with the last podcast. I think I ran out of space on my phone, so it ended abruptly, so my apologies. Hopefully this one is still recording, and if you haven't checked out our product and platform, please go to snowpal.com. Make your life more efficient, structured, organized, and more fun, so you have more time for doing things that you want to do, and download our app from the App Store and Play Store as well. Thanks.